What is up, YouTube? It's your boy Millzy back with the Hometown Commander. I'm back for another episode of Millzy's Deck Corner. Today we're going to look at my Miirym Sentinel Wyrm deck list. This is Temur Dragons, and it is a ton of fun. This is one of those decks that as soon as I saw Miirym, I knew that I needed to build this deck. And this is a deck that has been a lot of fun to put together, a lot of fun to play, and in my opinion, when it gets off and it gets going, it's a really fun deck. So first we'll read Miirym. Miirym Sentinel Wyrm is 3 green, blue, red for a 6/6 legendary creature, Dragon Spirit. Flying Ward 2. It says whenever another non-token dragon enters the battlefield under your control, create a token that's a copy of it, except if the token isn't legendary, if that dragon is legendary. So the first thing I had to learn with Miirym was that doesn't say on cast. It doesn't say when you cast a dragon spell, kind of like Volo. It says whenever a dragon enters the battlefield. So the first card that came to mind when I looked at Miirym was this card right here, Sneak Attack. Sneak Attack is an enchantment we've had for a while, but it just recently got reprinted in the original Double Masters back in 2020. It says for a red mana, you can put a creature card from your hand onto the battlefield. It gains haste, sacrifice at the beginning of the next end step. Well, with Miirym out, for a single red mana, we're going to put a dragon down from our hand onto the battlefield. We're going to get a copy of it because Miirym's out, but our original is going to have haste. I have sneak attacked a couple wins simply by dumping my hand of dragons onto the battlefield, getting those token copies that are going to stay, but allowing our original copies to attack right away and in for some value. I also put Perforos Bronze-Blooded, or Perforos from Theros Beyond Death, in here as well, because first off, it gives all our creatures haste, which is great. We want as many ways to give our creatures haste as possible. I'm showing 3 cards here because these are the 3 cards here because they work the same way as Perforos does, in that anytime we can give our creatures haste, it's going to allow us with Miirym to just dump a bunch of dragons on the battlefield and do a lot of damage in one swing. So Concordant Crossroads, Temur Ascendancy, which also draws us a card when those dragons come in. Note that second ability is not non-token. So when both the dragon and its copy come in, we're going to draw off of Temur Ascendancy. But Perforos says all other creatures you control have haste, which is great. All of our creatures, both the creatures that come in and the copies, are going to come in with haste. And then it has a similar ability to Sneak Attack. Then the difference is Perforos can only drop in red creature cards, and most of our dragons are red, so that's not that big of a deal, although there may potentially be times where we have a non-red dragon we need to Sneak Attack or Perforos in and we aren't able to. So that's one of our projected win cons here. The other one is going to be through cards like Dragon Tempest and Molten Echoes. Molten Echoes is a enchantment that says you choose a creature type. Whenever a non-token creature that type enters the battlefield, create a token that's a copy of it. That token gains haste, sacrifice it at the end step. So Molten Echoes is really good because it's going to do the same thing Miirym is in creating us a token copy. The only downside to Molten Echoes, of course, is that it doesn't make those copies non-legendary. So we will have to sacrifice that token that's a copy of it if it is legendary, but we will still get any enter the battlefield effects, and we will still get any effects that happen for it coming in. So for dragons like Terror of the Peaks, Scourgeo Valkus, which we'll get to in a little bit, or this Dragon's Tempest right here, it's still going to see those copies enter, even though we have to sacrifice them right away. Dragon's Tempest says whenever a creature with flying enters the battlefield under control, it gets haste until a turn. So this is another haste enabler for all of our dragons that are coming in. And in the bottom half, which is the more important part, says whenever a dragon enters the battlefield under your control, it deals X damage to target creature or player where X is the number of dragons you control. So every time a dragon comes in, we're going to get to point X damage at a creature or player where X is the number of dragons we have. So if I play a dragon and it's my 3rd dragon down, I get to point 3 damage, but Miirym's going to then make a copy of it. The copy's going to come in, and now I'm going to have an X equals 4 to point at somebody. So over the course of a turn, if we're dumping in creatures with Sneak Attack, or we have enough mana to play a couple of these creatures down at the same time, Dragon Tempest is going to line up some really good damage. The other 2 that we use for this are Scourgeo Valkus, which says whenever it or another dragon enters the battlefield, deals X damage to any target where X is the number of dragons you control. So similar effect, this one is just on a dragon body. And the good part here is, if I put this down with Miirym out, now I have 2 copies of it, and it's dealing the damage. And then the other more popular one is Not sure where I put Terror of the Peaks. I don't see it. But anyway, Terror of the Peaks does a similar thing. Whenever a creature comes into their battlefield, we get to deal X damage to any target, where X is that creature's power. So that's really good too, because when we dump those dragons in off of our effects, we're going to be able to point that damage and put it hopefully to good use as we start reeling the way. I'm not sure where Terror of the Peaks went. I show it on my list here on Moxfield. Not entirely sure where it is, but hey, that's okay. It's probably in here somewhere. We're probably going to find it later. But anyway, so those effects are really good, and I have 3 of them here. I have this, and then I have Terror of the Peaks. So we have a good chance of seeing them, and the good part is because of Scourgeo Vulcus and Terror of the Peaks being creatures, means we can search them out with our tutors. We can search them out with our cards that search out creatures. So that's really good because we have good access to them. And then the last big part of our win con is going to be something like Aggravated Assault. Aggravated Assault is an enchantment that says for 5 mana and tap all creatures you control. After this main phase, there's an additional combat. When you pair it with a card like Bear Umber, which untaps all your lands whenever you attack with the creature that it's attached to, this can go infinite as far as combat goes. But there are also cards like Savage Ventmaw that give us 6 mana whenever it attacks. And then we also have another copy of this in Hellkite Charger, which does the same thing, but for 7 mana. Now, we do have to pay it at the time of attack, so we'll need to have generated the mana before Hellkite Charger attacks or in response to the attack trigger, but that will also give us an extra combat. So these two play very well together, and these play very well together, allowing us to take extra combats. And believe me, when you have this many dragons in the air, any additional combat you make is going to do a lot of good. So there's a couple dragons that are going to fit into that strategy. So first, we're going to run quickly through the dragons, because a lot of them don't really do much for our grand strategy. They're just really good. We got Earthquake Dragon from Paranormal Legends 2. This one's going to come down, hopefully, most of the time for just a single green mana. We're going to have enough total mana value of dragons onto the battlefield. A good thing to remember for Earthquake Dragon is when you make a copy of a creature, the copy of the creature retains its CMC. So for the purpose of Earthquake Dragon, let's say I had, let's say I had 2 copies of this Kaiga down on the battlefield. This is 6, the next one's 6, so that's 12. That would reduce 12 from the cost of Earthquake Dragon. Now, more often than not, Earthquake Dragon is going to be just a single green. It's going to come down, and it's going to be really a bad time flying and trample. And then if we have any of those things like Terror of the Peaks that come down and deal damage, that's 10, that's 10 damage when it comes in. Tarkor Wildrunner going to give all of our dragons double strike. This is one of those creatures that's going to help us in the game once we have enough dragons. Inferno Starmons comes down with haste, so it and its copy will come down with haste, which is really great. It's going to help. Wrathful Red Dragon, one of the cards that's going to help us push our strategy forward. Whenever a dragon you control is dealt damage, it deals that much damage to any target that isn't a dragon, which is most of the time going to be players. So if someone manages to find a way to block one of our dragons in the air, we just take that damage and we point it to them. Thrakus the Butcher, whenever it attacks, double the power of each dragon you control. Again, this plus a Tarkor Worldrunner, or this plus anything that's going to give our other dragons a bonus, is going to just go a really long way in meaning a bad time for our opponents in combat. Drakaseth, whenever it attacks, you deal 4 damage to any target, and then 3 damage to each of any other 2 targets. It could be players, it can be creatures, it could be planeswalkers. Drakaseth does a lot of good to either knock down blockers that are in your way, or help just push through from extra damage. Utvara Hellkite, whenever a dragon you control attacks, create a 6/6. This is great because it doesn't say non-token dragon. So if you play this out and it doesn't have haste with the rest of your dragons attack, you're going to get a ton of 6/6 dragons. And if we have any of those other enchantments or creatures that care about dragons coming in, we're just going to continue to get some triggers. Dragonborn Champion, this one's great. Whenever a source you control deals 5 or more damage to a player, draw a card. We can get this in combat. We can get this from some of our other abilities. This is going to do a great job to keep our hand filled up and keep our strategy moving. Lathless, whenever a non-token dragon enters the battlefield under our control, we get a 5/5. So with Miirym out for the first dragon that comes in, we'll get one. We won't get one for the token, but that's okay, because even with 2 Lathlesses out, if we get the copy of it off Miirym, we're going to get 2 5/5s for every dragon, and that's going to be really good. Goldspan, one of our all-stars, helps us ramp up, gives us those treasures. Those treasures can sack for 2 mana, so this plus sneak attack can go a really long way. We got Gainax, Astral Hunter from CLB. whenever it or another dragon enters the battlefield, we get a treasure token. We're just going to keep getting treasure tokens and keep pushing ourselves forward. We got Spark Double. Most times Spark Double is going to come down as a copy of Miirym to allow us to get more copies of our dragons. But I've also copied a Terror of the Peaks or Scourge of Valkas if I have a couple of more dragons in my hand and I think that, and I calculated that damage of them all coming in can end the game. I have no problem copying them. We got Fur Crag, our face commander from one of the CLB decks. It has haste, which is great, but of course, whenever one of our dragons attack an opponent, we go to a creature they control. We can pick the biggest creature they have that we don't want to attack us, choose it, and it has to attack somebody else. And then we get that little bit of bonus in the at the end of whenever our goaded creature deals damage to an opponent, we get a counter. Cool part is when we have more than one Fur Crag, when it's copied, we get to start goading a bunch of things on the battlefield, which is really going to help us out. We got Scourgeo of the Throne. Whenever it attacks for the first time each turn, if it's attacking the player with the most life or tied for the most life, and tapped all attacking creatures after this, there's an additional combat. So the cool part here is if Scourge of Valkas comes down and we get a copy of it, we can probably get a couple combats by choosing to attack with the first one first, and then choosing to attack with the copy and attacking the right player with the highest life total, and hopefully we can kind of find a way to finesse out a couple more combats. We got Old Gnawbone, one of the best dragons we've seen in the last year. When we deal combat damage to a player, we get treasure tokens. Just going to keep pushing us forward. Clouth. I love Clouth. Clouth is one of those creatures that's going to ramp us up on mana. On a good turn, Clouth can give us some extra mana to continue to get set up. On a great turn, Clouth can give us enough mana to get into some of our extra combat effects or get into some of our other effects to keep our strategy going. I have seen Clouth give me enough mana to dump enough dragons in to kill my opponents with those other effects that we've talked about. So Clouth is huge. Sakashima of 1,000 Faces. Again, same thing here. Happy to have it come in as a copy of Miirym, but I am also more than willing to let it come in as a copy of another dragon if I need to, in order to get those effects. Good thing about Sakashima is it's going to now stop the legend rule, which means stuff like Molten Echoes is no longer going to make me sacrifice those legendary creatures. We got Ancient Copper Dragon. What a great card. When it deals damage to a player, we roll d20, get that many treasures. Of course, without a haste enabler, this card is kind of expensive. We're going to have to wait, but with how many haste enablers we have, this is going to come in and it's going to come swinging. And then Astral Dragon. So Astral Dragon is a big combo with cards like Doubling Season. Because the big combo, if you have yet to see it out there, if you're looking into this list, is using this or Parallel Lives or Primal Vigor. When this comes in, you create two tokens that are copies of target non-creature permanent, except they're 3/3 dragons in addition to their other types. So Astral Dragon would target Doubling Season. So instead of getting 2 Doubling Seasons copies to come in, because of Doubling Season and this original effect, you would get 4. Well, those 4 copies are then going to all trigger, causing you to create 4 2 triggers of any permanent. You're going to pick the Doubling Season again. Instead of making those 4, you now have 5 Doubling Seasons out, which would cause you to double this twice, and you would make that many tokens. Now, you don't have to do this indefinitely, although you could. You could go on indefinitely. Now, the hope here is you have that Dragon Tempest or you have that Scourge of Valkas out, and this is going to end the game with the amount of damage that you're going to put through. But if you don't have a Doubling Season out, there's a lot of other things in the deck we don't mind copying. You could copy a Soul Ring, you could copy a Mana Rock, you could copy an enchantment, you could copy a lot of other things, but make them dragons, which means they can attack and do other things. So Astral Dragon is a huge card, I think, because it allows us to A, hit that combo, but B, get extra copies of Mana Rocks if we need them, get extra copies of other enchantments that do us good, and it's just going to push our strategy forward. So let's keep going through the enchantments. We got Sylvan Library. This is going to help us get those draws off the top, push us forward when we need it. Got Wild Growth, a little piece of enchantment a ramp at the start of the game. Wild Growth is one of those pieces of enchantment ramp. If you're in green and you're in a green colored deck, I really like Wild Growth just because on turn 1 or 2 or 3, this is going to do a good job at pushing you forward. I usually also play Utopia Sprawl in green. The only bad part about Utopia Sprawl is it has to enchant a forest, whereas the growth can go on any land you'd like. So I really like these. I remember for Utopia Sprawl, you have to call the color, and normally I will call a color, like in this deck, I would call probably blue, because, you know, we don't need as many blue pips as we do red or green. We're going to have a lot more access to red mana than we are in the other colors. So pick a color that you need at the time and do that. Elemental Bond and Garruk's Uprising in this deck do really the same thing, which is this effect here. Whenever a creature with power 3 or greater comes in, you draw a card, and Garruk's Uprising says the same thing, but for 4 power. Every dragon we put out while Miirym's out is going to trigger either of these guys twice, which is huge. That's going to continue to refill our hand. And if we have enough mana, or we have a sneak attack and enough mana, it means we're probably going to dump a lot of dragons on the battlefield. Rhythm of Wild, this is another way to give our creatures haste. We have the choice of haste or a +1/+1 counter. So, of course, if the creature we're casting or putting down has haste already, of course, we won't need to give it haste. We give the +1/+1 counter. The only difference with Rhythm of the Wild is it's only non-token creatures. But every other ability in this deck that creates a token is not necessarily going to give it haste. Like Molten Echoes gives it haste, but Miirym doesn't. But that's okay. I think that's Rhythm Wild is going to be more effective for our regular dragons, and it's still going to pronounce a ton of value onto the board, even if we can't give our tokens haste. But the good part is those big dragons that don't have haste that we're playing are going to have haste right away, and they can attack that turn and then leave the copy back to block. We got Rhystic Study, or to refill our hand on our opponent's turn. And I've been a big card here. This adds a ton. Kindred Discovery. This has won me 1 or 2 games just by refilling my hand. It says when enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. Obviously, in this case, we're going to choose dragons. Whenever a creature you control of the chosen type enters the battlefield or attacks, draw cards. So the original, when it comes in, we draw a card. The copy from Miirym is going to draw us a card. Anytime we attack, it's going to draw us a card. It's going to refill our hands, and hopefully the refilling is going to help us push through for some of our combos. We got Arcane Signet. We got Soul Ring. We got the Crypt. We got Dragon's Horde, great in this deck. Whenever Dragon enters the battlefield, we get a gold counter. We can either tap it, remove a gold counter from it and draw a card, or tap it to add a mana. A lot of the times that card draw is really important on Dragon's Horde. So that's a great thing to have. We got Henge. Henge is going to work a lot like Elemental Bond and Garruk's Uprising in this deck, where when a creature comes in, now this doesn't care, it's just non-token. Anytime a non-token creature comes in, gets a +1/+1 counter, and we draw a card. This is great. It's going to keep refilling our hand. We got Sword of Feast and Famine. Sword of Feast and Famine is one of the cards that also pairs with Aggravated Assault as long as we have enough lands. When we deal combat damage here, hopefully, and untap, we'll have enough mana to put into the Aggravated Assault. So Bear Umber and this both act as a combo with Aggravated Assault and then Panharmonicon. The great part about Panharmonicon is with Miirym out, Panharmonicon is going to double the amount of tokens it created, but Panharmonicon will also double Dragon Tempest, Scourge of Volkas, Molten Echoes. All of those abilities that care about dragons coming in are all going to get doubled Panharmonicon. So Panharmonicon is absolutely huge in this deck. It's going to do a lot of good. I think those doubling season effects are good too, but I also think, as much as your logic would tell you jam as many token doublers in as you can, I think the Dragon Tempest and the Scourge of the Volkas are also more important, because one of those is searchable on creature tutors. Terror of the Peaks is searchable off a creature tutor, whereas I don't really have any access in these 3 colors to find this or Dragon Tempest that easily. So I like the diversification of the kind of win cons we have here, so that we don't always have to rely on just flying through the air. We have access to ways to get some of these combo pieces when we need them. Now, it's not just draw a creature tutor and win the game. We still have to have enough dragons to, actively win the game. But I think that a lot of the times having these 2 different strategies, we can go the sneak attack route and then the dragons entering the battlefield route, where we have enough cards to do them. I think both of them are paths that lead us to a win, and I've seen kind of honestly both of them equally. There's games where I see the sneak attack Perforos route, and then there's games that I see the Dragon Tempest Scourge of Valkus route. And I think that's what you want. You want your deck to have more than one way to win the game, and not just, I need to see these 2 cards or I win. Because this deck isn't a straight up combo deck. It plays some good combos that win us the game. But I think at the end of the day, we're a mid-range deck. We're a mid-range dragon deck that wants to win the game in combat in the air, if we can't win it other ways. And I think that's kind of funny to say, because a lot of dragons are giant in the air, and our opponents are not always going to have flying creatures to be able to block us. So just having advantage in the air is a huge thing, especially when all of our dragons aren't just in the air. They're not just big. They all have effects stapled to them that are going to benefit us. So I think that's where we're going to end up having our advantage. Just like any creature deck, our biggest weakness is going to be board wipes. It's going to be removal. But the good part is Miirym has Ward 2, which is going to make it tougher to remove. And just like I said in the Goreclaw video, we need to make sure that we're deploying at the right time. We don't want to deploy our creatures too early, because then we're going to invite removal. But we want to make sure that we're waiting till the perfect moment on the perfect turn to deploy the rest of our hand. We can put out 1 or 2 dragons here or there. You know, if you get that gold span early, you want to put it down, start getting those treasures. If I get that Clouth early, I don't mind putting that down early and getting the mana from it attacking. But I would say that this is one of those decks where you do not want to turn the gas on until you're sure you can push in and do good damage and threaten the game. And so this is definitely, I would say, one of those decks where it takes time to learn when do I hit the gas and go, and when do I wait and kind of allow the lightning rods that I have in the deck to take the removal as opposed to the important creatures. So that's one of those things that can take a little bit of time to learn. But I think once you get there, once you understand it, this deck is a laser beam. Once it gets started, it's very hard to stop. You know, a lot of these effects, just because you remove the creature doesn't mean you stop the other end of the battlefield effects from going off. You know, let's say a dragon comes in and Miirym's ability goes on the stack to copy it. You can remove the original dragon, or you can remove Miirym, but the copy's still going to happen. So I like that as well, because it allows you to kind of get your advantage there. We're just playing 1 Planeswalker, and that's Sark and Fireblood. The reason we're just playing him mainly is for that +1 to give us 2 mana. We put this down, we can loot if we need to, but that +1's there to give us 2 mana in any colors to get a dragon. So it's kind of like a 3 mana rock in that way that we can protect, but we're probably going to be able to protect it because all of our dragons are going to be great blockers. As far as ramp, we're playing Nature's Lore, Farseat, 3 Visits, and Rampant Growth. We don't need a ton more ramp because we got the mana rocks, and we have lots of fetches and things like that that are going to allow us to get the mana, the color correction we need. We are also playing Growth Spiral as well. So we got plenty of ramp. Some people would say it's not enough ramp, but I have get to a problem. And in the games where I'm down a land, I just delay my turn by a turn or 2, and then once I get there, it still pops off. So I haven't found the lands to be any issue. Genesis Ultimatum. To me, this is one of those cards that's kind of a potential street road to start at the end of the game. It's 7 mana. Look at the top 5. Put any number of permanents onto the battlefield and put the rest into your hand. If we hit all the dragons come in and we get copies of Miirym. If we don't hit permanents, they go into our hand at least, so at least they're not gone. But a lot of times you're going to hit a couple dragons. Hopefully you hit an enchantment or 2. All of them are going to come in. You're going to get your value from all of them, and you go from there. I don't mind paying the 7 mana. The reason that I'm not playing like Storm the Festival is too many of my dragons are over 5 mana, right? Storm the Festival's 5 mana. And then my other thought was a card like Genesis Wave. But the problem is I'm playing enough spells in this deck. I think actually Genesis Wave will end up hurting me more than it'll benefit me. And I think to get a good value in Genesis Wave, I need to dump, 10 mana into it? I need to pick 8. Genesis Wave, I believe, is X green. I'll take a look here. I believe Genesis Wave is X green. So it's X green, it's triple green. So I would need to put at least 8 in Genesis Wave to make sure that I get all of the dragons that I reveal put down onto the battlefield. And then the risk is everything else gets put into the graveyard. So I think Genesis Wave would be another option, but I think it's something that we're going to have to end up putting more mana into it, but we're also going to see more cards. So I think Genesis Wave is definitely another option for this deck, especially if you have that combo set up, if we have the Dragon Tempest and that kind of thing set up. I still think Genesis Wave might do it. It might be something I take a look at. But I have yet to see this card yet. I've played about 15 games with this deck, and I've yet to see Genesis Ultimatum. But I think it's one of those cards that will help when we see it. Blasphemous Act is here twofold. 1, it's a board wipe, and 2, with a Wrathful Red Dragon out, this will be 13 damage for every dragon we have to our opponents. So this is a little bit of a combo with Wrathful Red Dragon, and it's also a board wipe. We have Crack with Power. The main reason Crack with Power is in here is to pair with Clouth. Clouth is going to net us a ton of mana when we attack, and I don't mind having a card like Crack with Power in here to dump that mana into and just deal a bunch of damage to our opponents. We got Finale Devastation. Again, if we have enough mana, this is one of those cards that's going to end us the game, and since most of our creatures are in the air, we should hopefully have that advantage where Finale Devastation will spell the end of the game. Jessica's Will, a way to push us forward on mana. We only get red mana with it, so if we're careful, we can tap our lands the right way to get red mana. And even exile those charts at the top. And then we got a Sylvan Tutor, just another way to get those important dragons that we need and get them quickly. We're also playing Worldly Tutor, so we got 2 and then 3 creature tutors here in Sarkhan's Triumph. These could go get our big combo dragons. These also could get a dragon like Goldspan, which is going to help push us forward if we need it to. We got Brainstorm, we got Heroic Intervention, and we got Cyclonic Rift. Brainstorm is just a little bit of draw, especially in the early game. Heroic Intervention, a way to help protect our board. And then Cyclonic Rift, a great way to overload it and get some pesky stuff out of our way. There are 2 dragons that I show here in my Moxfield that I don't see. Here we go. Here's one of them, Ancient Silver Dragon. This is our Ancient Dragon we got from Legends Baldur's Gate that draws us cards when we hit an opponent with damage. And that's going to spell no problems for us of the game for us for having access to cards and creatures. And then there's the Terror of the Peaks. He was stuck in with the lands. Terror of the Peaks is our other big creature. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield or control, it deals damage equal to that creature's power to any target. So Terror of the Peaks is one of those other combo dragons. It's going to do a lot of good. I think as far as the mana base goes, it's fairly straightforward. I'm going to have the link for this deck down in the description. You can go see my mana base. I think your big lands are stuff like Cavern of Souls, City of Brass, Ketria Triome, Haven of the Spirit Dragon, things they're going to tap for all of our colors of mana. The rest of it comes down to your preference. I really like certain land cycles. So if you take the link to my Moxfield and you look at a lot of my main decks, you'll see that I have a preference towards a lot of the same mana land cycles in my decks. If you're more interested to find out what ones those are, I won't go through it here, but we'll be posting some videos where I'm going to be brewing some decks and stuff like that. And you'll see, as I brew those decks, I'll be reaching for the same cycles all of the time. But as an abridged version that I would consider auto-includes in every deck, your fetches if you have money for them, your shocks if you have money for them. We just got a great cycle of lands the last time we went to Innistrad that come in untapped if you control 2 or more other lands. And then what I call the commander lands from Battle Bond and Commander Legends that come in tapped unless you have 2 or more opponents. Those are kind of your, to me, auto-includes. And then the rest of them are kind of your preference. I really like the check lands from Dominaria and Ixalan, and I really like the filter lands from Shadowmoor and I can't remember what the other set was, but they did reprint some of them in Dome Masters. Those are the other 2 sets of lands that I really love. You can check out what specific ones would be needed for your deck by just using a couple different online resources you can find. In this deck, I am playing the City of Brass, just because sometimes it is important to get that other color of mana if you need it. And I am playing Reflecting Pool as well. Just got reprinted in Baldur's Gate, taps for any color of a land that you could produce. But guys, that is Miirym, Sentinel Wyrm. This is one of my favorite decks in my deck box. I love playing this deck. I've been searching for a Dragons deck for a long time. And I have started to test my old Clouth list again, but that list is a lot more transitioned toward big damage spells and creating a lot of mana and, extra combats and that kind of thing. Whereas this deck is a lot more of the mid-range token plans with Miirym and taking advantage of some of those blue dragons and some of those blue spells that we get to play that we don't get to play elsewhere. So I hope you guys enjoyed this deck. Like I said, link for the deck list will be down in the description. That goes over to my personal Moxfield page so you can see this. And if you watch this video too far in the future, that will be the link for the deck where you can see how I've updated it. So if you watch this far enough in the future and I have updated this list, you will see what changes I've made. Wizards have been printing, honestly, some pretty good dragons every couple sets. So I'm sure the dragon base for this deck will change. But we will see when it comes down the line. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will catch you next time.